Rocket City Podcast, how's it going? Welcome to the show, episode 5. Today, we have a special guest, Joe Barry. Hey, Joe, how's it going?
Going good. Glad to be here.
Good. So, Joe is on the show today because he has a very special history, very unique, and a lot of experience with NASA. And, Joe, the first question I want to ask you is, what was your position at NASA? And give us an overview of what MILA is and how it works with the space program, and also why was it the most unique communication center, or why was it one of the most unique communication centers versus all the other ones?
Okay, so MILA was a tracking station at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. So
Okay.
we fell under a NASA contract under Goddard Space Flight Center up in Maryland. We were called the Spaceflight Tracking and Data Network. It was built back in the mid-'60s, mostly for Apollo, initially for Apollo. They opened sites from around the world to try to cover as much area as they could.
Okay.
And we provided all telemetry support, so transmitting to the vehicles and receiving back from the vehicles. And the reason that MILA was special was because we were at the Kennedy Space Center. So we had to handle all pre-launch testing, launch support. Nobody else could do any of that. So we were the first ones. We were the first ones to deal with any vehicle that was going to be launched that we were supporting.
Wow. And what time frame did you work there?
The first time I was there from 1973 to 1988.
Okay.
And what I did was I worked in what they would call the front end of the system. So I worked in a section called USB, stands for Unified S-Band, and we handled everything from the antennas outside, the big S-Band dishes, all the way into the building, transmitters, receivers, demodulation equipment, modulation equipment, and command data going up to the vehicles. So we were in the front end. We were the first ones to receive it, the signals.
All right. And to my understanding, your father also worked there before you worked there when MILA actually started. So what was his role, and what did he work with in the Apollo program?
Okay, so we lived in New York. He worked for Northrop Grumman. And what he was working on is the engineers gave them the LEM and told them, here's all the sensors that we have on the LEM. Here's what we want to know about it, right? Hundreds and hundreds of things they wanted to know on the ground. So he was on a team trying to figure out how are we going to package this stuff up, put it onto carriers, and beam it back to Earth and receive it at one of these stations to where they can take it back apart, send it up to Houston, and have it spread out onto their screen so that they see everything that's going on the vehicle.
Was he your main influence for working at NASA because of all that, or what influenced you to work at NASA? To my knowledge, what we discussed is that a lot of your family worked at NASA, and so this is kind of the thing to do, working at NASA, right? Or explain how that.
Well, I knew he worked at a tracking station, but due to my age, whatever, I was interested in other things. I don't remember how much he told me, but I knew basically what they did, and I didn't expect to ever work there. He just allowed me to slip in as a janitor back when I was 17. Somebody's son or daughter had to do it. It always was. So I got it. So what really influenced me was going back into the technical areas and seeing what they were doing. And it looked so complicated. And I wanted to know what they were doing. I asked questions a lot. So I hung out back there and asked a lot of questions. And I just decided I wanted to do that. So I started into school and I worked my way up so that I ended up back there doing what they were doing, tracking satellites. Okay. Transmitting and receiving signals back.
Okay, so going a little off what we talked about. You said in school, so from high school there's like a provided course for that, or like how did you transition into that? And you said you're a janitor. What role exactly were you?
Exactly. I cleaned the bathrooms, I cleaned the floors, I swept and I mopped, and I helped the facilities craftsmen. We had our own diesel generator section because anytime we were doing any kind of test on Apollo or Shuttle, we did not stay on local power. Everybody had Florida power and light, and our electricians called them Florida Flash and Flicker. So we had our own power. Anytime we came up on any important tests, we switched over to our own power. So I would help those guys, the guy that worked in the diesel generator rooms, air conditioning people, facilities craftsmen. They built things around the site. So I did that in addition to cleaning up. And it gave me a chance to hang around out in the back rooms a lot, you know. And part of that was good. Some people didn't like it because my dad was a boss, but I didn't care. I mean, it was fun, and that's what really influenced me was watching it happen.
That is pretty neat. You're just like there for the experience, and then moved your way into it.
That's right.
That's so neat. So explain to us how the whole communication system worked with the S-bands and all that. I know it's changed a lot from the Apollo program to when they just worked on the satellites. Or launching the satellites, how they communicated with that, and then to Skylab, then to the shuttle. They had to construct so many different things. Can you explain in detail how that worked and what your role, what you provided for that?
Okay. Well, I'm going to pull out a whiteboard here
I
can draw a little bit, because I think when you look at it this way, it'll make more sense, and it's easier to see than me just talking through it. So you don't have to remember what I said. You'll see it right here.
There you go.
So we transmitted data to the spacecraft, and we received data back from the spacecraft. One of the cool things about it that was so unique was that we did it all through the same antenna simultaneously. So we could send a signal out at 20 kW, 20,000 watts, and receive our signal back from the satellite at really, really low levels, all at the same time.
Huh.
Okay.
So
in order to do what we needed to do, we had to be what they call two-way with a satellite or with Apollo when they had Apollo or Space Shuttle. We had to be two-way. So here, I'm going to give you a little picture. So let's say this is a satellite. We got a satellite up in space, and it's got some solar panels on it. Looks like that, whatever. Doesn't matter. And Mila's down here. And you got an S-band dish. And over here you got transmitters. Transmit. X means trans, if you didn't know that. And over here you have receivers. Okay? The signal that leaves from the transmitter makes this one. So when we transmit to any satellite, even today, it's the same way. You transmit a signal at a certain frequency. Let's just take one that is really, really common. It's 2106.4063. That's megahertz. So now you can see it. So we're transmitting to the spacecraft on this particular frequency.
Okay.
What happens is, on the satellite, they don't have a transmitter and a receiver. They have a transponder. So when it gets this signal, it turns it around. We call it the turnaround. And the turnaround ratio is always 221 over 240. It's all the same. It always has been for satellites. It still is. It was for Apollo, and it was for Shuttle. Okay? So what comes back down is 2287.5. 2287.5. This is a very common frequency. And here's why we needed it so much. The signal that we send goes up into the satellite. It receives any command data that we sent to it. It receives ranging data that we've put on the carrier and transmitted to it. And it's going to send all that right back down.
Okay.
The command data and the ranging data is coming right back down. What they do is they add their data onto it. Okay? Most of the time, that data starts with what they call real-time data or housekeeping data. You have to know what's going on your satellite. What's the temperatures inside? They may want temperatures from 20 different places inside their satellite. What position is it in space? X, Y, Z axes. What position is it in? How fast is it going? How fast range and range rate? How far away is it? And how fast is that changing? In order to do all those things, you have to have this two-way communication. So what it's called is phase coherent. It's a coherent signal. This signal has the traits of this signal. And by timing it and telling how far it went this way, how long it took it to make the whole trip, we know how far away it was. Another thing that happens is that the people in Goddard, if they want to send a command to their satellite, they send the command. It comes down to Milah from Maryland.
Wow.
It's transmitted out to the satellite and immediately back down to the ground. So this goes out to Goddard again. So what happens is the guy up at Goddard, he hits a button, says the command's out, and about 2 seconds, 1 second later, you see command got in, command was good, because they get real-time command verification right on the spot. They know that it had to go through their satellite.
Wow.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
They don't just send it and say, well, let's see if that worked. They know that much later because it's the speed of light. So they know really quick whether it got in or not.
Yeah, wow.
Okay.
And that was so essential just for the whole program and everything, from Apollo, all the satellites, Skylab, Shuttle.
So we provided range and range rate data, and we tracked signals. We did not track objects. We could not track an object, only the signal.
Okay.
Okay? So when we were doing what's called auto tracking, once we caught the satellite coming up over the hill, and once we got locked onto it, we went to an auto track mode with the antenna. So the antenna is now following the signal, and it's really accurate. So they're using our data, position data, XY data, Doppler, and they're using that to predict the next orbits for other people to track and for us.
Wow.
So they have to keep track of it all the time, and so they know where it's going to be the next time. Because nothing's perfect. They don't just launch a satellite and say, okay, it's in this orbit, and we'll know where to find it for the next 5 years. It doesn't work that way. It's not perfect. Okay, so they have to have data constantly to update these the orbital information.
Okay.
So this is called a phase coherent link. So they send back real-time data. That's the housekeeping data, like on the shuttle, tells them all the little things they need to go know about their spacecraft. Then there's other data that they put on there. That's the scientific data. Okay, that is put on there a different way, and it's usually called dump data. D-U-M-P, dump
data.
And the critical data on satellites is when they dump it and they are erasing it at the same time. So when
It's
they
just like
send dump
computers.
data and you know you're getting critical data, that means if you lose it, it's in the bit bucket. It's gone. So very expensive per second to get this data. So it was really important that we got this dump data. That was the scientific data. Okay. But every satellite had the real-time data so you could tell what was going on your satellite. Same thing with the shuttle.
Okay.
Okay.
And so the switch over from Apollo missions and all the launching all those satellites. Well, they're still launch satellites during the shuttle program, but the switch from that to the shuttle, to my understanding, what I've done with the research, you had to. They built a lot of other things, like the PDL tower and 2 other towers, and they made this. No, you're good. Go for it.
I got to get that.
And they made this bent pipe radio frequency. Can you explain all that and how they worked with the TDR, the tracking and data relay satellite
system?
Yeah,
TDRSS.
I love how they say the bent pipe system, and you said it was one of the first times you heard that. And the way you described it, though, was so much better and my understanding it. And then when I was reading it, because I was just like, what? There's these 3 towers, and then Milah, and then it's bouncing off Kennedy, and the satellite. And the satellite, so they put the satellite up to develop the space network. And correct me if I'm saying this wrong. The space network to, what do you need? Oh, do you need another marker?
The satellites are put up by a wide variety of people.
Okay,
And
right.
For a wide variety of reasons. They're studying different things.
Okay.
Groups get together and they say, okay, we need to know more about whatever, the stratosphere, something in Earth, or with the sun, maybe. Maybe we need to study the sun, whatever. Maybe it's like Hubble, right? Looking out into space and being able to tell more about deep space. There's just almost an endless variety of satellites up there and what they're doing, what they're looking at, and measuring.
So, the TDR, or sorry, I keep saying it wrong. TDRSS. TDRSS. Yeah. So the TDRS though was in that bent pipe system specifically for the launches, or
no? Had nothing to do with launches.
Got you.
TDRS could not do any launch coverage.
Okay.
That's another reason Milah had to stay there, even though there was TDRS satellites. The TDRS satellites took over Earth orbit, low Earth orbit satellites. So as we launched more and more of them, Milah became more of a backup to TDRS more often than prime. Okay. There was a time when we were prime, right?
Okay.
I mean, they were taking our data first. But after the TDRS satellites got up there, they started picking up more and more of the satellites in their Earth orbit stuff, right? So, so two things happened with Space Shuttle when Space Shuttle got there. We had already supported many launches, and we never had any problems with those launches. And we found out with Space Shuttle we were going to have a huge problem with launches. You know, it's something that I was back there operating, tracking satellites, and I never would have dreamed that it could be a problem, right? Because nobody had ever had it before. But Shuttle was different. I'm not a great artist, so what I'm going to draw you, I'm going to draw you just a solid rocket booster, because the Shuttle had 2 solid rocket boosters on it. You know, the main propulsion was from them, 3.3 million pounds apiece of thrust. Okay, they were huge, way bigger than any solid rocket booster ever built. All right, one of the substances in there is ammonium perchlorate, and what happens is when it burns, these plumes outside of in the back end of the boosters was really long and really wide, and it had a lot of this residue in it from ammonium perchlorate. And what it caused was a bunch of free electrons. So here's what happened at Milah. So Milah's over here, and we're looking straight across to the launch pad, and here you have a You're
good, Joe.
I'm not good.
I appreciate that you brought the board. It makes it so much better.
Okay, this is a solid rocket booster, and when it's sitting on the launch pad, we're looking at it straight across the ground, just like that. We had a few trees to go through, little bushes, but that was okay. At S-band, that's okay. In the morning, it would cause us problem with the dew on the trees, and we had to tell them over and over what it was, and they just seemed to never get it.
Never.
No, the data would look a little bit different, and they would go to hunt it down.
Huh.
How come it looks different? It's a little bent. We'd tell them it's multipath. If the trees are wet, it's bouncing all over the place before it gets to you, gets back to you. Anyway, so we could see it just fine when it's sitting on the launch pad. But here's what happened. They launch east over the ocean, right?
Right.
They have different launch azimuths, like which actual direction it's going, but that really didn't matter. Here's what happens to it when it's going up and what happened to Milah. So it makes this nice curve like this until it's way up there and it's headed out to orbit, right? Well, when we're looking at it on the launch pad, everything was fine. But when we got to here, now we are looking straight into the rear end of it, and the flames are like, they're huge.
Okay.
We're looking right through them. You can't see through them.
Yeah.
We had solid rocket boosters like on Delta 3, Castor 9 engines. We had those, but they weren't near big enough to cause us a big problem. We had some plume attenuation, but they came to us and said, you're not going to have just plume attenuation. You're going to lose it completely, and we can't lose it. We have to have it. So what would happen is for about 45 seconds or so, we couldn't get it. We couldn't transmit to it or receive from it. Once it got way out here, our look angle is good again, and the signal would come back. But from here to there, we were no good.
Okay.
MILA was getting nothing. So they went up the coast about 45 miles, and they leased some land from the Coast Guard, and we built a wing site. They came to call it Mini Milah after a while.
Mini Milah?
But it was at Ponce de Leon Inlet, so it got the call sign PDL.
Okay.
And they were built only for that 45 seconds of data.
Just
30 to 45 seconds of data.
Okay.
That's the only reason they were built.
Wow.
So what would happen was when it lifted off, we were transmitting to the vehicle, like I just showed you, transmitting to it, and it was sending back that data. We also had another link just for main engines, but it was downlink only. Main engine 1, 2, and 3. Different data stream for each engine. Okay.
Wow.
So what would happen is we would be transmitting from MILA and watch the clock, and we would know when the handover is supposed to be. And it ends up being a long time ago, was at 45 seconds, the first handover. So at T plus 45 seconds, what happens is the guy at MILA, and that's where I was on STS-1, operating the transmit side. At T plus 45 seconds, MILA stops transmitting, and simultaneously PDL starts transmitting. Well, due to the way they were built and the loops and a little bit of lag time, it was glitch-free.
Really?
So it was glitch-free. So we're not transmitting anymore. Our radios are going away. I mean, signals just dropping like really, really bad. So they had it for about 30 to 45 seconds. And then we took the handover back from PDL. When we got over here and we were clear again, they stopped transmitting and we started again. So in that first minute and a half, it was MILA, hand over to PDL, take the handover back from PDL.
Okay.
And then we would have it all the way to T plus 5 minutes and 45 seconds where Bermuda would pick it up.
Okay. So Bermuda, a
Bermuda
different station?
At 5:45, yeah.
Okay.
In the same system.
Yeah. Okay.
They would get it at 5 minutes and 45 seconds.
That's pretty neat. And so did you stayed at, during your role, you were still at MILA specifically. You never went over to PDL at all?
I went to PDL.
Oh, you went to PDL?
Sure, I remember them building it.
Yeah.
I mean,
okay.
Some people didn't want to go up there, never went up there hardly.
Yeah.
But if you wanted to go and you wanted to go help,
You could.
you could.
Okay.
Because I worked with a lot of people that had done all of Apollo, and they were in the armed forces before that.
Oh.
They were radiomen. That's why they got them when it started, back with Mercury, Gemini. They used those old receive and transmit systems with the first birds, right? First things they put up, which was Mercury and then Gemini. So they were kind of like, some of them didn't want to have much to do with Space Shuttle. They were waiting to retire. So the way it was I just wanted to dive in. I wanted to learn everything I could, and they just let me learn everything that I could learn. You know?
Holy cow.
Every time I asked, can I get in on that? They say, yep, you can get in on it.
It's like the perfect internship. You were just at the right place, right time. They wanted to step back, and you were just like,
It was.
I want to learn it all.
That's right. So I went up there and helped do some things. I don't remember what they were. Maybe laid some cable or whatever. I like to do that kind of stuff anyway.
Yeah.
I was up there for a few launches here and there, I think. Yeah.
So was this the 3-hop microwave system?
So when PDL got the data from the shuttle, they had to get it back to MILA. So it went through 3 microwave towers to get there. And it's just a matter of distance, signal level.
Okay.
Right? I mean, it decreases at a logarithmic level as it's really decreases quickly.
Yeah.
So it was just a matter of that. we need these 3 places to repeat it and keep the levels up and make sure it gets to MILA nice and clean. And then it went into a system they had built called the BSS, Best Source Select System. It was automatic. It compared MILA data with PDL data and made the choice constantly. Best Source Select. So it took the best data they could get.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Huh. So, during this, how many missions did you get to work on for the shuttle program? I know you were talking. You had to look at it.
26.
26? Okay.
And 2, wait a minute. 26, 28.
28.
Yeah.
All right. And
26 the first time and 2 the last time.
And you explained that there's a lot of other things you guys, the launches weren't the only things you guys covered.
No,
Right.
in the beginning, before TDRS, once we launched the space shuttle, we did every orbit we could see.
Okay.
Okay, you'd usually see about 5 orbits, an hour and a half apiece,
Okay.
right? And then you wouldn't see the next, see it for 12 hours for quite a while, and then it'd come back around, and you'd have the next ones. And we were prime, so we were prime. The only backup we had backup reception at the Kennedy Space Center. There was some other sites, I don't really know who they were. They could receive, but they couldn't transmit.
Huh.
So they couldn't be part of this two-way communication.
Yeah.
They had to have it, and it had to come from us.
Okay. And so how many of you were there to work on that? Like, were there different shifts? Like, I know a lot of launches are at different times a day whenever they're going to launch, right?
Yeah.
And so, did they have to call other people in, or were you guys like, when they were launching, you had to be on the clock?
No.
Like, you were there? No,
No.
I didn't think so.
So back when I worked there, most of the time, from 73 to 88, it was 24 hours a day, 365 days a year.
Yeah. Wow.
Coverage.
I figured.
We had a lot of people.
Okay.
As the years went by, when I went back, it was only day shift and swing shift, 8 a.m. in the morning to midnight. And we didn't do anything from midnight till 8 in the morning, unless it was a shuttle launch. And we would come up 24 hours before the launch and stay 12 hours on, 12 hours off till the mission was done.
Wow.
But so if you were on that shift, you were the one working it, whether it was a landing or a launch or an orbit. Except for the first launch. The very first launch, they did something they had never done before. They asked for volunteers. The reason they did that was because the shifts were chosen by seniority. So the people that could get the day shift were the people with all the seniority. But some of them, they weren't really that interested in it. They wanted people that were interested in it, is what they wanted.
And so you just slipped
So
right
I went in there and I
Yeah.
said, hey,
Yeah.
I've been working on this position for years. I've been studying it, and I know it. I know what to do. And he just said, you got it.
Wow.
So I had to change shifts that day to come in for that first shuttle launch.
Holy cow.
Yeah, so in my section, you're looking at 6 people, I believe it is, 6, to operate. And then there were other sections. When we were done with the signal, we sent it to a computer section, and then they sent it to the wire room to be sent out to everybody that wanted it, what parts they wanted. Houston, the LCC over at Kennedy Space Center. And we had a recorder section to record everything. So we had several different sections. We had a section called PCM, which is post-com modulation. They just took the signal apart. We sent them the telemetry. They started breaking it down into frames and stuff like that, so that when they got it to Houston, it was in a usable format.
Okay.
We did all that.
Wow, that's pretty neat. So explain. Well, I'll explain, or I'll ask you this. So you worked there till 1988, correct?
Right.
And so what? You worked during the Challenger accident, obviously.
Yes.
So explain that day, from your perspective and what you were doing, and how, I guess how and what you had to do. This, like, did you know just from the did you know from the data? Could you tell? I know that's very, like, and a lot of people have a hard time talking about this because, it's
Yeah,
the disaster. We lost 7 astronauts.
it takes me right back to the day.
Really.
Takes me right back to the time.
Yeah.
I usually don't talk about it much.
Okay.
But
share what you want.
here's the way it was. I was on the transmitter, the same as I was for Columbia, SGS-1.
Okay.
I was on the transmit side. Okay. And what that means when I say we're mission critical, I'm standing in front of a rack of equipment, and it's generating the signal that I'm going to transmit. It's modulating it with the data coming from Houston or from the LCC. The command data is modulated onto it. The ranging equipment is right next to me. It's sending the data that's modulated onto it, and I'm sending it out. Okay? So I have literally one switch right up here that says carrier on or carrier off. And carrier on means we're transmitting. Pushing it, it goes off and we're not. Okay? So in other words, if that piece of equipment stops working, not only are we not transmitting, but the real-time data link goes away too, because I'm creating it. I'm sending it up to the satellite. It's turning it back around. So if you stop transmitting, the receiver over there drops lock because there is no downlink. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's what I was doing. And here was the schedule. I remember the schedule exactly. At T plus 45 seconds, I did the handover to PDL. So that's MILA to PDL, DL, handover. And then the second handover happened at 1 minute and 15 seconds. That's T. Yeah, good T, Joe. T plus 1 minute and 15 seconds. I would hand over back to PDL. You got that?
Yeah.
This is T plus 75 seconds. Got that?
Yeah.
T plus 75. So at T plus 70 seconds, I was... Sorry about that.
You're good.
I was just like this, just watching the clock.
Yeah,
Right.
you're ready.
And at 73 seconds, all the radios in the room, all 10 of them, went to noise. Because what we did, like in your car, when you get a radio station that locks up, you hear the music. You hear the people talking.
Right.
Well, with these radios, the data is too high to hear it. Data rates, you can't hear them. So what we would do is when we locked up the receiver, we'd turn the audio all the way up.
Wow.
That way, if you weren't looking at the radio and you all of a sudden heard noise, just static started, then you knew that radio dropped lock. And at T plus 73 seconds, the whole room burst into noise because we had 10 radios. 5 on the side I was doing. We had a whole nother system on the other side backing us up. 2 antennas, 2 sets of receivers, 2 transmitters.
So it's just all the sound.
All went to noise
yeah.
at T plus 73 seconds. 2 seconds before I was supposed to do the handover.
Wow.
And I just stayed focused and did what I was supposed to do at T plus 75 seconds. And to put this in some kind of perspective for you, I was in an aisle with maybe 20 racks. A rack takes up a 2 foot by 2 foot square on the floor and is 7 feet high. So it's a row of them, right straight down.
Yeah.
Okay. On the far end, you got the servo guy, his stuff. He's the antenna driver. Okay. And next to that, you had the transmit stuff. And then the ranging equipment. So I'm standing right there. About 10 feet to my left is the radio guy. And he's standing in front of the 5 radios on our side. And about 15 feet past him is the TV section. Now, at that time, we didn't have any onboard TV. Not till after Columbia.
Yeah.
But he could see all the NASA feeds, right? And he had them up there watching. Nobody else could watch, but the chief tech was down there. He doesn't have to operate. He's making sure we all operate. But he's standing in front of the TV section. So we just turned to him, and I don't know who said it. Somebody said something, and then he just turned and looked at us, and he just said it blew up.
Gosh.
You know, and I know people all over the world were affected by it.
Yeah.
But Merritt Island, Florida was probably about like people that were close to the program here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of those people probably knew.
Well, we knew more than
all the shuttle, all the astronauts there, and
we knew more than most people did.
Right.
Because we could immediately look at the data, and we had range data.
Yeah.
We knew exactly how high up they were, exactly how fast they were going.
Yeah.
And one of the painful parts was I saw people, not at MILA, but other people that I knew, glued to the TV for 48 hours when I didn't sell them, but I knew already.
Yeah.
And there wasn't any, they didn't have a chance. Yeah.
That's crazy.
So it was a sad day.
Yeah.
So I stayed till the next successful launch. It was 2 years later, 2.5 years later, it was Discovery, returned to flight. I stayed until after that, before I left.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that with us, and that's very impactful, I think, for people to realize like where you were during that time, and like that is wild from your perspective. And then thank you for doing the proper steps, you know.
Now it went on.
Yeah.
Because at T plus 5 minutes and 45 seconds, we didn't know much. We still didn't know much.
Yeah.
I remember looking over to my supervisor and saying, "Do I do the Bermuda handover?" And he says, "Yeah, go ahead and do it."
Wow.
So I handed over nothing
Holy cow.
to Bermuda. You know,
That's
it's
crazy.
just- yeah.
Wow. Well, so taking more of a positive look at 1988, you stayed till the Discovery launched.
Yep.
And so
That was another Tejas satellite.
yeah, so you left. Please explain to me, because I know a lot of people, you were telling me, think thought you retired from NASA, but
No.
you didn't really retire. So explain.
No, I was only
explain what you mean by that.
I was like 31.
Yeah. I don't know. Like, you could retire at 31 if you were paid good enough, but
I had some adventurous part of me that
Gotcha.
didn't want to drive. I had done it for 16 years. Drive down the same road every day, work at the same place. Yeah, it was really cool.
Yeah.
It was going to slow down. Everybody knew that. As the Tejas satellites went up, our orbital support for satellites was going to go down.
Got you.
But we knew it would be there till Shuttle was over, because nobody else could do it.
Yeah.
Right? And I just decided to go. So I left. I worked for the Marine Corps for 5 years.
Okay.
I worked for the Army for 5 years. I worked in a casino for 7 years.
Wow. And doing like similar things, working with the radio frequencies and
Casino,
stuff?
I started out as a technician working on slot machines.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I moved up to being a supervisor there.
Okay.
And I did 7 years of that.
Okay. So you did a lot of traveling with all that too?
When I worked for the Army, I learned amusement games first. That's what I worked on. Amusement games on Army bases. Fun games.
Really?
Fun job. Because when you fix a game, you got to test it. we always had 2 or 3 games that we were testing in the office, in the shop. So when the day was over, we had plenty to do. Pinball machines or whatever machines we had back there that we were working on. I went to Germany with the Army to do slot machines, because my regional manager just convinced me. He said, they're easier than amusement games. Slot machines are. They have lots of spare parts, mostly just swapping parts. So I went to Germany for a year and a half. I stayed over there.
That's pretty neat. Do you feel like that got you out of you said this, you had this call to adventure after all that, because you've been working with NASA for so long? Right at 17, you said, you're just working with them and develop great skills and experience, and not just a natural talent, but mastery. in such a way that you were one of the only persons now and still here that can do such a thing. Did you feel like you fulfilled most of that adventuring after all that? After you left?
Well, yeah, it was.
Yeah.
I worked for the Marine Corps. That was just a complete adventure.
Yeah.
They hired us during the Gulf War.
Okay.
They put us in Jacksonville waiting for the ceasefire.
Wow.
Waiting for the ceasefire.
Wow.
I worked on what's called the Maritime Preposition Force. So the Marine Corps had finally tested its 10-year-old program of having their equipment pre-positioned around the world on ships.
Whoa.
So when the Gulf War happened, while the Army was putting all their tanks and all their 5-ton trucks and their Humvees and all that stuff onto rail cars to get them to the coast, to then only unload them and put them on ships, the Marine Corps already had the ship loaded and spread out around the world.
Holy cow.
So when the Gulf War happened, all 15 ships steamed there from around the world. Took them all about 10 days at the most. And the Marine Corps was waiting on them. So they flew the guys over there. All they needed was their sack, their gunny sack, whatever it was. That's all they needed.
Huh.
We had everything else.
Wow.
So it worked. Yeah. So when they hired me, it was for the regeneration. They decided not to send them all back to Jacksonville, where they were run out of Jacksonville, Blunt Island Command. They decided to regenerate them, replace everything in Saudi Arabia.
Wow.
So that's where I was for 7 or 8 months.
You went to Saudi Arabia?
Yeah, I was there for
Okay.
6 months, 7 days a week, 12 hours a day.
Wow. So you definitely got to travel the world. After that was
Well, then I got
neat.
a permanent job on board the vessel.
Wow.
Yeah, partly because I knew people.
Yeah.
That's the way
How
it
is
is.
ship life?
It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I mean, I liked it.
That's cool.
I mean, we're in a place like Hawaii
Yeah.
most of the time. Diego Garcia.
Oh well.
It's right in the middle of the Indian Ocean.
Okay.
It's a little British-owned island,
Yeah.
shaped like a big footprint. They call it the footprint of freedom, and has a bunch of ships inside the atoll because it's a natural harbor.
Wow.
So that was our home port.
That's pretty neat. There's the North Carolina battleship where I'm from, in Wilmington, North Carolina, and like touring around there or inside the battleship. I mean, you were on what type of ship were you on?
It was a cargo vessel.
It was a cargo vessel. Okay, touring on this battleship, like walk around, like it's so just small. All the living spaces. I just couldn't imagine actually living on a ship. It would be pretty neat. And you said you enjoyed it, so
Yeah, our rooms were pretty good.
okay.
They were pretty good. Yeah.
That's cool. That's cool. So you weren't done with NASA though. They called you back, correct? So explain that process.
Well, not specifically me.
Okay.
What happened was that in January of 2011, January, they had a contract that was in dispute for quite a while. I don't know how long it was. When they have these contracts up for bid, whoever loses, most of the time they appeal it, right?
Yeah.
Well, it changed hands when they didn't expect it to. So it changed hands in January, and Milah's last track was supposed to be in July. Barring any
July 2011.
buying any holds.
Okay.
6 months to go. So they were already down to a skeleton crew.
Oh wow.
So when 3 people decided not to go with the new company, they retired. And they needed those 3 people replaced. So they needed people that had done that before. Not just an electronics guy. They needed a tracker.
Yeah.
They needed 3 of them. And they got 2 of them out of retirement. There was 2 Winnebagos in the parking lot for the next 6 months, because that's what they were doing. They were traveling around in their Winnebago retired. But they had both worked in the GSFC system, right? Oh, I said that wrong.
You're good.
GSFC, Goddard Space Flight Center, that's
Okay.
right. State-and tracking, they had already done that. So I was one of the ones. A friend of mine, I knew he worked there.
Huh.
He called me and he says, "Hey, we need somebody. We already talked to him about you. You can have it if you want it." I said, "Sure, I want it."
Huh.
Because the guys in the USB, I had worked with them for 15 years, the same guys. So they knew I could do it, so there it was. It was hard to find people.
Yeah.
Right.
So you were there for the last 2 launches.
Yes.
And for people in the audience, the shuttle program carried on from 1981 to 2011. And 2011 was the last shuttle launch, the Space Shuttle Atlantis.
Right.
It was a night mission, military mission. And that's crazy that you worked on the last 2. What was the one before Atlantis, the last one?
I don't remember.
Okay, but you were called in for both of those. Or, well, you got...
Well, I went back in January.
Okay,
Or,
in January.
or right at the beginning of February.
Okay.
Just before the outgoing company left. So I worked for the outgoing company for a week.
Oh, wow.
And then the incoming company was LJT and Associates. I worked for them for the next 6 months, basically.
Okay.
Doing exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
What they had done is they had they called it laying computers over the top of the equipment. So the equipment looked fine. It looked the same as it used to, except that it was really advanced when it was built by Harris RF Communications. They could control almost all of it from one single spot. But what they found out is it was designed so that it could do it all by itself. But like so many things they designed to do all by themselves, they find out we need some human interaction here.
Yeah,
First of all,
yeah.
they have to fix it if it breaks. Second of all, there's nothing that beats a guy standing in front of a radio. Even though the guy down there can see if it's locked or if it's not locked. Relocking things from a remote place, they just wouldn't do it. So they still needed people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. And so that's crazy. So how did it feel like being back there? Like how long have you not been back, or what was the time span where you haven't been back there? Then you started working there again, and did it just feel the same, and like it felt amazing again that you could just hear all the launches and see the launch?
23 years.
23 years.
That's
Wow.
how long it had been.
Wow. That'd be neat.
And there was a third as many people. It was
Yeah.
not that
Because
many
of the
people.
computers.
But in my section, the section I went back to, out of 15 people or so that were in the section, 10 of them or something like that were there when I left.
Wow.
So they never left.
Holy cow.
Yeah. I don't remember the exact count. It may have been less than that.
Yeah.
But when I walked in the room, I could have been blindfolded and pointed out 3 or 4 people by their voices.
That's wild.
Yeah.
They're just still there. Huh.
Yeah. Still there.
And you had that option, but you wanted to be more adventurous.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I could have stayed there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's so cool. So what you said too, I really with the whole AI and how now they're talking about AI taking over the world and computers and stuff, you still just need that human touch. And the fact that they required it for the last last 2 shuttle launches, I think is amazing, and that the computers just couldn't hold up to what they intended it because and they needed you, and specifically people that worked with that system before. I think that's very interesting to really look into, because people in just career fields in general that get paid the most, they call it the 10,000 hours of mastery of a skill, and I mean. And from your time, it's just like you do this thing. Now I think a lot of what I've had problems with, and a lot of people my age, we don't just stick to one thing, and it's causing an imbalance in our own lives where we are not making enough money to support our own families and income and stuff like that. But it's just impressive that you did that for so long and early on, and then you took your skills and you traveled the world with them. And that's just amazing. And you got to just do so many cool things with all that. And
I've been blessed. I've just had what people would say are very unique jobs.
Yeah.
Very unique
jobs.
Yeah.
And all this started, though, from being 17 years old, starting as a janitor,
Well, yeah.
quote unquote, and just going in. And
during my 15 years there at MILA, I would meet people downtown 5 years later, 10 years later from high school.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, of course, you say, hey, how you doing? Yeah, fine. Where do you work? Kennedy Space Center. Oh, me too. So where do you work? MILA? Where? Never heard of it.
Ah.
I say, okay. So when you come in the NASA Causeway, and they tell you the first thing on the right is the visitor center with all the rockets and all that, but it's really not, because a mile before that, there's this road that goes that way down into nowhere. Mm-hmm. They say, oh, down with all the antennas. I said, yeah, that's where I work. So I met people like that all the time.
Yeah.
I had friends that did nothing but TPS, thermal tile protection.
Okay.
You know, thermal protection system. That's all they did. They never got a college degree.
Wow. They did.
They don't teach you TPS in college.
Yeah.
There's nobody else can teach you.
Yeah.
You see what I mean?
That's
it's
what blows
such a
me.
unique job.
Yeah.
And they didn't want you to have any preconceived ideas about how you do it. They're going to tell you exactly how to do it.
Yeah.
And they're going to have 3 people checking behind you to make sure you did it the right way.
Yeah.
I mean, human space flight, they go to great lengths on everything. I mean, if you're doing a test, you know, a simulated launch test, and something doesn't go the way it went yesterday, it all gets written down, and teams look at why.
Yeah.
They have to know why.
Every detail.
Everything. If this was different than yesterday, then we're going to find out why it was different than yesterday.
Huh.
You know, so everything, they go to great lengths. Yeah.
Yeah. That was wild. And the crazy part from your story too, that with all that, and like how my age group and with NASA like requires degrees now, like for almost everything it seems. And it's so interesting that you talk about that, because I just think of all the little jobs that they're going to have to fill, that if you have a degree, yeah, but everything you learn in school, they're just going to have to teach you something totally different, and none of that's going to matter. Just even the guys on the front end of building the SLS rocket and anything else that they're trying to do to go back to the moon and stuff. I mean, I don't know, they don't talk about that and what they're doing about that and who are building the rockets. Usually it's the engineers and the technicians, and they all require a degree. But they're having a hard time with my age group and millennials, and even some people just a little older, sticking to the job long enough to work out the kinks and work out the details and the testing.
Yeah,
and I think that's another problem with how it's being prolonged. Some of the projects being pushed, rescheduled way later than what they intended.
Right.
So.
Right.
Yeah. Something interesting that came up before we started was my roommate's girlfriend had a box from another friend who bought this house, and it was a house that a NASA engineer or somebody that worked at NASA had, and they had a bunch of pictures. And you said that you had all these pretty much the same thing. They just explained NASA handed those out to every employee.
Well, yeah, my father was, he started as a technician, but he moved all the way up as far as you could go. So he was the manager of operations. Yeah. So anytime you were involved, Milah was involved in any kind of a launch or mission of any kind, they were sent packets. You know, it's what you got. Didn't matter if you were a janitor or if you were an engineer. Yeah. Everybody got the same packets. So they would send them to my dad. They'd send him 200. Well, if the count was 175 at Milah, they didn't want him back. Yeah. He just built up all this stuff that was left over. So I got a lot of that.
That's pretty neat.
Yeah.
And so this guy had a lot of stuff too. And I found some things when I was looking just before I had Joe come over here and we do this podcast. I'm like, wait, that's Milah right there. And can you explain?
That is Milah, yes. Yeah. So this is looking from the south end. You're only seeing just one little corner of the building right here, but even just looking at that, can you see it?
No, you can't see it.
You gotta point it this way.
And we're almost at the hour mark.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so this is an S-band 30-foot dish.
Here, try to have your mic.
This is an S-band 30-foot dish right here. Underneath that is a shack they call the PA shack. power amplifier shack. Sits right there. This antenna is actually big enough that you can climb up into the little ball there. It's called the Y-axis. You can go climb up in it. The Y wheelhouse, they call it. So you can see the other antennas. There was antennas everywhere. They used to call us the antenna farm sometime because we had so many. But yeah, we had 2 antennas. Actually, we had 2 of those 30-foot dishes. You just can't see the other one in this picture.
Okay. That's so neat. And isn't that crazy that I found that, like, all this today?
Yeah.
And this right here, you said there's a bigger one that you have. I don't know. Would you want to hold it and point out? Well, it's actually really hard to see the little dots, but this map is showing all the communication satellite or communication centers, and MILA is right here. And I just thought that was crazy. I was like, I found a map with,
that brings us to another interesting thing.
Oh, yeah.
Because when Shuttle came around, they not only said you're not going to be able to track it for the launch, but you're going to have a problem on the landing.
Oh, I didn't even think about that.
So we had 2 antennas, all right? Now, these antennas are an XY mount, okay? There's basically 2 kinds. You have azimuth elevation, they just call them AZ-L, or XY. There's maybe more than that, but that's what we had. So these big S-band dishes were XY, okay? And one of the things about them that's different from the AZ-Ls is they couldn't see the entire sky. They could not, if you rolled the big dish like that picture showed all the way down to the horizon, it wouldn't spin 360 degrees. It would only move about 170 degrees. And then it would have a gap. So here's the way it looked in that picture over there. It shows it. If that's Milah, shoot. Let's say that's Milah, I-L-A. And let's just say that, I don't know, Florida, Texas, all that out there. So Milah can see a circle about like that. Okay, so our antennas were both mounted the same way, and since they can't see the entire sky, there was a place up here just like this. Can't see that. That's because of the keyhole. We call them keyholes. So the antenna could swing all the way around to there, but they'd run out of, it couldn't swing any further. They would have to roll the x-axis all the way over, and it would miss this spot. So that was on the north side, and there was one down on the south side, like that. Here was the problem. We had 2 antennas, and they were both mounted the same way.
Oh, no.
Yeah. So landing low across the horizon.
Yeah.
Maybe for orbits also. If it cuts through the keyhole, we have it, and then we lose it. They said, we can't have that. So they moved our second antenna and turned it 90 degrees.
Oh, my gosh.
Right. So,
and did you
so
say,
in
you
the map,
it
shows Milah 2, and that circle looks like this, and the keyholes are now west and east. So you see that?
Yeah.
So that we could switch between systems. Yeah. So we could cover the whole sky. You see what I mean?
Yeah, okay.
If it was going through this keyhole, use this antenna. If it's going to go through the east, through this keyhole, you could use that antenna.
Okay.
You could switch. In live, you could switch.
Interesting.
Yeah. So we had 2 systems that were capable of doing all that. So that was a huge job, moving that antenna. It was really cool watching them move it. I thought, how are they going to move that thing? It's so big.
Yeah.
They put it on airplane tires, and they were almost flat. They were way down. They were way down there, and I went out to the guy, and I was watching it move really, really slow. I said, "The tires are almost flat," and he says, "Yeah, that's what we want. That's the way we want them. Cushion, large footprint on the ground. That's the way we're going to do it." And there was a dip I thought, oh man, that thing's gonna fall over. But they knew what they were doing.
So
They rolled it all the way over there, and we had to recable the whole thing, of course.
wow.
That's a really big job.
So they meant for the tires to do that.
Oh yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, they were experts at moving really big stuff, probably like houses, things like that, because
Yeah.
there's big antenna. So there's another thing that happened because Shuttle
Because the shuttle
was coming, and we couldn't have any gaps anywhere.
So you track launches and landings.
Oh yeah, we were the only one that could do a landing.
Yeah.
Because you always needed that two-way communication, and we were the only ones that had the transmit side,
Yeah.
from what I understand. I didn't keep up with it that good, but I remember when I was back there, they interviewed, right near the end, they interviewed some MILA people, and one of them said, yeah, the reason we were the only ones is because nobody else had the transmit capability that we had.
Yeah. Wow. That's pretty neat. I didn't even. It's crazy, like learning about all the MILA stuff and communications and how it was so essential to everything. And I want to go back to this one document. And today, before the show, I'm reading it, and it's talking about when they switched over. It's talking about Apollo 8 and how Milah was key in how Apollo 8 succeeded. And at the end, it talks about who was assisting supervisor. So it says, under the supervision of assistant M&O supervisors Robert Schroeder and Lynch Berry. And I just was like, that's his father. That's Joe's father.
That's right. That's right.
So that was just crazy. That was all today, and you were coming over. We'd what's the coincidence?
That is really a wild coincidence.
Yeah.
There. Because I don't think I have that document.
Yeah.
But I remember the name Schroeder. I remember that from
You
way
remember
back
Schroeder?
when. Yeah.
Okay. So Joe, from this and this everything, you're not the janitor. Just want you guys stop saying you were the janitor at the beginning. You are. Everybody talks about you, and you're just a legend. To be honest, you really are, and just your whole story.
That's my call sign.
That's your.
That's what they gave me.
Oh yeah, that's your. Okay.
Yeah.
And so from here on, what are some things you want to do before your life comes to an end? What other adventures you want to go on, and what are the dreams you want to fulfill?
I don't
Just
have
so
any
curious.
really big.
Yeah.
No big things.
Okay.
No big things.
I mean, you've done so many big things already, so it's just like.
Yeah, my jobs have all been pretty unique. I had a few little ones in between there.
Okay.
Running a fast food restaurant, but
Really?
Well,
Between
sure.
that? That's interesting. Okay.
2 of them.
Okay.
A Sonic
All right. You worked at Sonic?
and a Chick-fil-A.
Chick-fil-A. Okay.
They were short-lived.
Yeah. Or is this transition periods where you
Yeah.
work for other? Yeah. Okay. Well, I didn't know that. That's pretty neat. What do you think about NASA's plans to go back to the moon? What's your opinion on all that? And you think we're going to do it by 2024?
Sure, I think it's all really great. You know, I can remember people at MILA. They were all pretty disappointed at the end of Shuttle that
Yeah.
there wasn't something to pick it up from there.
Yeah.
And I feel the same way. It's tough to deal with that America couldn't put a man in space.
Yeah.
And for a long time.
Yeah.
It's since 2011. Yeah. I mean, it's a long time. Space programs are big. They're huge. They're complex. They take years and years to get started, and planning and all that. Yeah. That was a tough time.
Yeah.
We're going to put it to an end here in a little while.
Yeah. Hopefully with.
I mean, I'm a SpaceX
fanatic
guy. I just love SpaceX.
I was going to ask you about
Yeah.
SpaceX and what you think about it, and I wanted to ask you this scenario: what if they needed to know about S-band communication, and they're like, "Hey, Joe, would you do some consultation work?" Just out of
they
curiosity.
probably
You never know.
by now, since Mila's phased out and all those other places, there's no telling. I don't know. I think they have their own place at the Space Center.
Yeah.
They probably do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you say Mila's phased out, so they don't use it
Milah,
anymore?
closed the day after STS-135 came to wheel stop on the runway.
I did
The
not
next
realize
day was a big ceremony, the handing over of the keys from the NASA director back to NASA. Here's the keys, and it was leveled.
that. Wow. It was leveled?
It was leveled.
It's not even there anymore?
It's gone.
What?
1966 to 2011.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I bet that was a hard day just watching that. And well, what you just explained with it coming to an end and then watching where you worked for so long and just, gosh.
Some of the guys worked there 40 years.
Yeah. What is it? What is it now? Did they build something over top of it?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay. Wow. That is crazy.
Yeah.
Well, Joe, the plans to go to Mars too. Like, what do you think about that? Go for Mars?
I think they're going to have a lot of hurdles
Yeah.
to get to Mars.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mostly anatomy, human, how much can they take? You know, they're studying that the best they can. But there apparently quite a few things change when you go to space. So they have a lot of things to
Yeah.
understand and get through. But I think it's cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think if they would have kept up the same rate as they did Apollo,
Uh-huh.
we'd be up there already.
Yeah? You think
Well,
it would-
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there were so many plans in the making already by Warner
Yeah.
von Braun, even
Well,
that far back that
yeah.
he wanted
It's
to go.
just, it's extremely expensive. You
Yeah.
know, that's one
And
of the
dangerous.
things. Just it's really, really expensive. You know,
Yeah.
and it has to be studied. That's just a bigger step than the moon. I mean, it's a really long mission, right?
Right.
So there's a lot more things to consider,
Yeah.
a lot more things to study. You know, more people will be involved in it. You know, overall, right?
Communications wise, from your perspective, what is it, like 20
I don't
minutes?
know. But
to get to Mars?
basically, they're probably going to do it about the same way.
Yeah.
I mean, you got to send data up there,
Yeah.
and you got to send it back. You know, you have to keep in touch with them. So that's RF communications, right?
Is there a way to get it like faster, to make RF communications faster? I mean, it goes at the speed of light, and that's the fastest.
That's it.
That's the speed limit.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's really no way, and it takes like 20 minutes one way and back, and that's one big challenge too.
Yeah.
So,
Mhm.
yeah. Would you go, Joe? Would you go to Mars?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I'd go.
Take it right now. You just go to Mars.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
All right. All right. Well, Joe, is there anything else you would like to tell our audience before we end this show? This amazing show. This is probably my favorite one so far. No.
I can't think of anything we left out.
Yeah, I know. We put it all in there.
If I come up with something, I'll let you know.
Nah, yeah, for sure. If you
Yeah.
ever want to be going again, you just let me know.
Well, you've heard more of my story than anybody
Really?
ever has.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah. Nobody was ever interested enough, you know,
Well-
to want to hear it.
Well, I'm glad we can get it out to the world, because I think it's a valuable experience, and I want to thank you for letting me get it out to the world.
Well,
Because-
thank you for having me.
Yes, I think it's important for all of our guests to get their experience and value out there, because you may never know. You might want to go into communications, and it might be a big thing in the future for the SpaceX program. I mean, there's so many new things in the space program that we still have to, like you said, research and develop. And so many changes with SpaceX on board now, and just what we're trying to do with the moon and go back to Mars. So thank you so much, Joe.